Sunday, technically, when the Falcon 9 rocket from SpaceX had a oxygen tank overpressurization problem, which caused it to disintegrate. Or rather, that was one of many factors which caused it to disintegrate. This is Digital Drive. I'm your host, Russell. We're talking about the Falcon 9 rocket now. And it's such a heartbreaking thing to see this Falcon 9 just disintegrate like that. Space is a very, very difficult thing. It's not like in the movies where it's like, yeah, we'll just build a rocket in our backyard and we'll launch it into space. It doesn't work that way. I wish it did, but it don't. You can't just launch a rocket into space and say, well, hope it goes okay. It's hard to get out of the atmosphere. That's one of the most challenging parts, actually, is exit velocity, and there's all these different determining factors in actually getting your rocket off the ground. And plus, this is a private venture, so they don't have unlimited funds, although they do have some help from NASA, fortunately, over at SpaceX. Still, it's a very, very difficult thing to watch when you know billions of dollars have just blown up. Billions and billions of dollars have just exploded before your very eyes. It's a bizarre thing to witness. Well, the SpaceX launch failure is now being blamed on an upper stage oxygen tank. So following an on-time liftoff at 10:21 a.m. on Sunday morning, a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket carrying an unmanned Dragon cargo vehicle broke apart over the Atlantic Ocean. Falcon's first 2 minutes of its flight into the International Space Station were flawless. However, approximately 139 seconds into the mission and just prior to the first stage of separation, the vehicle disintegrated. This is the first failure, according to Ars Technica, of the Falcon 9 for the California-based SpaceX. Since its maiden liftoff in 2010, the company has celebrated a total of 18 successful launches. The Falcon 9 rocket is composed of 2 stages, with the first stage shut down, also known as the main engine cutoff, or MECO, or MECO, occurring approximately 159 seconds into the flight. However, approximately 20 seconds before that, the vehicle experienced an anomaly. SpaceX CEO Elon Musk, who is now, I'm sure, weeping with $100 bills to wipe his tears away, said the Falcon 9 experienced a problem shortly before the first stage shutdown. There was an overpressure event in the upper stage liquid oxygen tank. Now, if you watch the video of the Falcon 9 exploding, or disintegrating would be a more accurate way to put it, it's heartbreaking. But there's some interesting physics things going on when this is occurring. Now, I'm not a physics major by any means, by any stretch of the imagination, but I do know a few things about space, and I do know very limited things about physics, so I can give you a little bit of insight into this, possibly more than you may have heard on TV, although I don't know. But what basically happened was the upper stage oxygen tank had an overpressure event, which either caused a explosion in the upper section with the tank just exploding, or it caused a leak which altered trajectory, which meant that it lost aerodynamics, which caused it to disintegrate. That's the problem. So you have 2 major problems. You have a oxygen leak, which causes supercooling of, well, not quite supercooling, but massive cooling anyway, of the objects which the oxygen comes into contact with. Because remember, oxygen is actually very cold. Liquid oxygen is freezing. It's below freezing, actually. It's very, very cold. Liquid oxygen is on par with liquid nitrogen when it comes to cooling things down, and also flammability. So that causes a whole bunch of problems. But you have liquid oxygen which leaks, which causes, again, overpressurization, which causes cooling of the metals, which causes, again, quite a few problems because you have cooling and you also have heating from the friction of exiting the atmosphere. Lots of problems at play here. Then you lose aerodynamics, which means you're basically you have a lot of opposing force going against you. If you've ever stuck your hand out of a car window in a moving car, you know what I'm talking about. Now imagine that times a few thousand, and you get the idea. So very, very heavy forces going on here. Wind is not to be trifled with. It's kind of like if you walk into water and you're totally fine, you know, but if you jump from a high altitude and smack onto the water like a belly flop, it feels like you just smacked into the ground. Same thing with air. If you're hitting air at a very high velocity, then you have disintegration, which is what happened here. So, and unfortunately, the Falcon 9 had that problem of disintegration. So unfortunately, we have to deal with the effects of that, which is lots of money having gone to not quite waste because it is a learning experience, but lots of money burned away or disintegrated away, so to speak. So on-screen telemetry posted during the live broadcast show the vehicle reached an altitude of 45 kilometers and traveled approximately 4,700 kilometers per hour. That's really fast. The launch footage appears to show the Dragon separating from the Falcon following anomaly. And Shotwell added, "We did receive telemetry from the Dragon after the anomaly occurred." If I'm remembering correctly from my travels up to the Great White North, which was actually more gray than anything when I went, then 120 kilometers is roughly 70 miles per hour, if I'm remembering right. So you get an idea of how fast 4,700 kilometers per hour would be. In a post-launch briefing, William Gertzenmeyer, who's NASA's Human Exploration Division Associate Administrator, told reporters, "This is not really where I wanted to be on a Sunday afternoon, but spaceflight is not easy, and we don't want to make a light of this. We lost a lot of important research and equipment on this flight. We lost the IDA, a water purifier, I should say, and a spacesuit. We have to see how we can recover from that." So hopefully this doesn't mean a loss of trust between NASA and SpaceX, because again, that would be a kind of a problem. If you have a loss of trust between NASA and SpaceX, then it's less likely that we'll be seeing really, really cool things like the Falcon 9 launch to the International Space Station. I don't think that'll happen, though, because the folks at NASA know that bad stuff happens. I don't think anyone knows better than NASA, the folks over at NASA, I should say, that bad stuff happens. I mean, you had tragedies like Apollo 1, you had things like Apollo 13, you had terrible things happen with rockets exploding. I mean, you had Atlantis and you had Columbia. So the guys at NASA know that things explode and things burn up and things disintegrate in ways that you definitely don't want. Tragedies happen. Fortunately, nobody was actually on the Falcon 9, which would mean an even bigger tragedy. And because it's a private institution, SpaceX is, that would mean that there'd be a lot of problems with insurance, and death is a liability. It's to be sure. Death is a very big problem if a company is responsible for it. That sounds very unemotional. I'm a very unemotional person, but it's true. Death is a very big financial problem if you own a company. So death is a very big problem for any company, especially when it's an extremely high-risk job like the one that the folks over at SpaceX are working. Well, there's really no commonality across these three events, Gertzenmeyer said, other than the fact that space is difficult. This shows the difficulty and challenges we face every day going to space. SpaceX and the ISS team performed everything exactly right. Space is a demanding environment, and we are pushing the vehicles to the limit every time we launch. ISS program manager Mike Suffredini, I should say, told members of the press, we've always assumed, I should say, that we would lose cargo vehicles along the way, as getting to low Earth orbit is challenging. We just didn't expect we would have to have 3 losses in 1 year. So unfortunately, SpaceX has a lot to recover from with the loss of this Falcon 9 rocket, because it's not like the Falcon 9 failed to launch or anything like that didn't do any damage. The Falcon 9 rocket is now gone. You have to build another one, which is very expensive. Billions of dollars now has to go into building a new Falcon 9. So unfortunately, the folks over at SpaceX have that to contend with, and I wish the best to them, really, because I am very excited by the idea of privatized space. NASA has, of course, done a lot of good work over the last, how long has NASA been around? 60 years now, maybe? NASA's done a lot of really good work, and there's no denying that we've gained a lot from what NASA has done. But this is the 21st century, and privatization is the cool thing now. And so I'm very excited to see what will happen with privatization of the space industry. Perhaps it wasn't feasible back in the 60s, but it definitely is now. We have venture capital. We have people who are inspired. So I'm very excited to see what will happen with the privatization of space and space travel and cargo flights and such in the near future. I'm a drone enthusiast. I've never flown a drone, and I have seen a drone flown in a drone flown. There could be a song about that. I've seen a drone flown in person, but I've never flown one. They're very expensive things, and I wouldn't want to wreck one. But I am an enthusiast in the sense that I really like to read about them, and I'm very fascinated by them, and I'm a very enthusiastic supporter of drone flights. Well, a man shot down his neighbor's hexacopter in a rural drone shotgun battle. Now, that's on the surface of it, that sounds like a very malicious thing to do. But there are a lot of determining factors in what led up to the shooting down of the drone. I mean, maybe the guy's flying a drone right in the guy's backyard. Maybe the guy hit his dog with his drone. You don't know. I don't know until you hear the whole story. So according to Ars Technica, While we've heard of consumer drones getting in the way of commercial airliners and obstructing firefighting operations, we're going to get to that, don't worry. We haven't heard of many drones getting shot out of the sky by a neighbor with a shotgun in this instance. But according to one drone pilot, that's exactly what occurred in Modesto, California on November the 28th, 2014, which is surprising to me that it occurred in California because I thought nobody had guns in California, but apparently people do. That's joke, of course. Everybody can own a gun in California unless you are a convicted felon and unless the mayor doesn't like you. But that day, Eric Joe, no kidding, his name is Eric Joe, skipped Black Friday lines and instead went home to visit his parents. During the afternoon, Mr. Joe, flew what he described to Ars Technica as a homemade hexacopter drone. His aerial device hovered low and moved slow, logging just 3.5 minutes of flight time in total. Now, 3.5 minutes, not very long. But again, drones can be pretty fast, so okay. And then a loud bang, a loud boom rang out over the neighboring walnut trees. Growing up on a farm, Joe instantly recognized the sound as a 12-gauge shotgun, as probably you would too, being a Southerner as I am. We're all familiar with what a 12-gauge shotgun sounds like, especially when it's right next to your head and blows out your eardrum. Thank you, Dad. 12-gauge shotgun sounds very, very recognizable. The unknown shooter hit his apparent target in a single attempt, and Joe soon watched his drone fall out of the sky. Drones cost a lot of money, by the way. This drone could go up to thousands of dollars in cost. So Mr. Joe says, when I went out to go find it, I saw him come out shotgun in hand. Now, when you have an armed person who's a little bit aggravated running at you or walking towards you, you get a little bit worried, even if you're used to being around guns. Joe told Ars Technica by phone on Thursday that he found this gentleman walking towards him shotgun in hand. His neighbor, Brett McBay, is the gentleman in question. So Mr. Joe asked, did you shoot that thing? And he said, yeah, did we get it? Joe claimed that McBay thought that it was a CIA surveillance device. Well, a noble attempt by Mr. McBay, I will say. He says, no matter the reason, the drone pilot wanted to resolve the encounter quickly and civilly, so that I didn't want to get argumentative with a guy with a shotgun, Mr. Joe said. He went back inside and inspected the aircraft. It wouldn't be flying again. Later that evening, the two men exchanged emails. Mr. Joe started the conversation saying, it was nice to meet you and your son. I wish it could have been under different circumstances, but I have to give credit to the McBay School of Marksmanship, he says. Still, I'm pretty bummed that I just built this hexacopter and only to have it shot down. Also, it was a little disconcerting to know that the spread of the birdshot/buckshot was in my direction, says Mr. Joe. In any case, I had a chance to test the components of the down hexacopter. Good news is that the more expensive components on the inside of the frame are intact. Stuff on the outside of the frame took the most damage. Mr. Joe included an itemized list of the damaged parts, which rounded up to an even $700. Mr. McBay responded, with all due respect, he spelled do the wrong way. He used the wrong do. It's D-U-E instead of D-O, but hey, whatever. All due respect, $700 seems excessive. Perhaps in San Francisco, it's normal for folks to have drones hovering over their property, but we live in the country for privacy. I will be willing to split the cost with you, but next time let us know you're testing surveillance equipment in our area. I'll drop a check of this afternoon. Huh? Oh, he means off. He'll drop a check off this afternoon, but he said of. Well, you know, spelling mistakes could be forgiven, certainly. Mr. Joe then wrote back saying that, well, you kind of have to pay the whole amount of money and yada, yada. Well, 3 minutes later, Mr. McBay replied, your facts are incorrect. I'm considering this matter now closed. Well, that's kind of a problem. Well, now there's been a lawsuit. The court finds that Mr. McBay acted unreasonably in having his son shoot the drone down, regardless of whether it was over his property or not. The Stanislaus County Court Small Claims Division found Mr. Joe, the owner of the drone, won $850, but Mr. McBay has yet to pay. If Mr. McBay does not pay by the end of this month, Mr. Joe and his attorney told Ars Technica that they will be pursuing further legal action to collect the money. Well, the last thing you want to do is to get in a fight with your neighbor, right? I mean, you live next door to the guy, or maybe your parents do. You don't want to leave a bad taste in their mouth, right? I make a point to be on good terms with the neighbors who live in the direct vicinity of me. If they come out and ask me to please stop firing firearms at this hour of day, which I thought was very reasonable, then I will very, very graciously say, of course, I'll stop firing guns. When would be a good time to do so? You know, that sort of thing. It's just common practice. You want to stay on good terms with your neighbor. But if your neighbor allegedly fires a gun directly in your direction towards you, perhaps, well, that leads to some problems. I don't like being shot at. I've had guns go off very close to me, not in my direction, but very close to me when I wasn't wearing ear protection, and it kind of freaks you out. So it's something that's disconcerting. Certainly, I am pleased that Mr. Joe's not filing a personal claim saying, personal damages, I was scarred for life or anything like that. He only seems to want the money for the damage that was done to his drone. So props to him for that. But Jesse Wu, who is Joe's cousin and attorney, says, "We don't believe that the drone was over McBay's property. We maintain that it was briefly over the shared county access road," said Jesse Wu, Joe's cousin and attorney. "But even if it did, you're only privileged to use reasonable force in defense of property. Shooting a shotgun at this thing that isn't threatening your property is not reasonable," he posits. Mr. McBay did not return to Ars Technica's repeated attempts to reach him by email, phone, or text message, unfortunately. But honestly, if I were him, I would also not be saying anything. So you can sort of understand that. Well, drones have been causing quite a few problems in the recent months here, actually. Of course, this happened a little while ago over Christmas, but still, drones have been actually causing a few problems just recently, where now we've been seeing a case of hobbyist drones actually forcing tankers to abandon wildlife fighting efforts. So hobbyist and civilian drones have actually become very popular just in the last few years. I personally know somebody who flies them professionally. So drones are picking up in the market, even here in the Chattanooga area, where it's almost criminal to fly a drone for commercial purposes unless you have an FAA license, which doesn't make any sense at all, really. I mean, think about that. Just think about it. Put some thought towards that. You have to have a FAA permit in order to fly a drone for commercial purposes, but if you're doing it privately, that's just fine. Not sure I understand that one there. It seems a little bit out there, honestly, when you think about it. It seems like you've kind of a right to make money, and they're trying to hamper that, it would seem. So it seems a little bit, over the bounds of what the FAA is capable of doing legally. But hey, nobody's argued with it, really, so we'll just go with that. You don't really see that problem, though, in the European Union, which is far less capitalist in ideals than the United States tends to be. So, well, anyway, hobbyist and civilian drones have been quite popular, and thanks to falling prices and improved reliability and growing interest from companies such as Amazon, Facebook, and Google, tension between drone operators and commercial aircraft have also been mounting, with numerous videos of near misses and several lawsuits filed over privacy concerns. Now, civilian drones have caused significant problems for firefighters trying to battle wildfires around Big Bear Lake in California. According to the LA Times, an air tanker and two smaller planes were actually forced to turn back from a wildfire, which has grown 25,590 times. Let me try to work this out. 25,599 acres is how big the area this wildfire is currently just 19% contained. On Wednesday, when the event occurred, the tanker plane spotted a drone circling at 11,000 feet, most likely to take pictures of the action. These folks who are handling these drones, I have to assume they have no idea what they're doing, says Sean Rebesius, I believe is how you say his name, who's a spokesperson for the U.S. Forest Service on Thursday. He said they not only endangered the folks on the ground, but they endangered the pilots as well. The DC-10 diverted and dropped its flame retardant on a different fire in Nevada, but the smaller planes were forced to dump their loads due to landing weight restrictions. Now, that, again, is kind of a problem because it's not actually legal to fly even a private drone at that altitude. Private drones are limited in height, so it's illegal to fly them at that limit. The problem is not the drones, right? The problem is people flying these drones in an unsafe and actually kind of illegal manner. So you run into a lot of problems. It's not the technology's fault, it's stupid people. That's a point that really needs to be pushed, is that technology is almost never at fault. In fact, I would argue is never at fault. It's stupid people. My favorite analogy is I can stab you to death with a screwdriver, or I can use it to build a church. It's just, that's just how it is. Tools are tools. A drone can be used for really cool stuff. You can use a drone for, say, scoping out property. Sure. You can use a drone for surveillance or surveying, right? Not surveillance. That's a negative use. You can use a drone for surveying. You can use a drone to take some cool pictures. You can use a drone to make a really neat movie. You can use a drone for all sorts of practical and recreational purposes. You can also use a drone for doing really dumb things like flying into airplanes. You can also use a drone for really dumb things like voyeurism. You can use a drone for really, really dumb things, but it's not the drone's fault. It's yours if you're doing it in a dumb manner. That's just how it is. The technology is not the problem. It's the usage thereof. So you have to keep that in mind. Technology is not a problem. It's how you use it. And that's the bottom line. It applies to guns. It applies to tools. It applies to anything. It's just a tool. That's all it is. That's all it comes down to. It's just a tool.
This is a modern world. This is the modern world. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing about
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Hi, this is your computer speaking. I don't feel so well. It's like I've come down with a bug, and I'm getting slower.
Affordable Computers. We fix sick computers. Your hometown guys at Affordable Computers will repair your PC in half the time of the big boys at an affordable price. No tricks, no gimmicks, no computer speak technobabble. Just good, quick, and courteous affordable service and repairs. Want to affordably supercharge your PC? Affordable Computers on Highway 58. Affordable Computers hand builds all desktops in-house. If you're looking for a better-than-new refurb laptop, $150 will get you a Dell or another name brand at Affordable Computers. Affordable Computers, Highway 58, between Arby's and Taco Bell. Also Fort O, Battlefield Parkway, near Holcomb's. Affordable Computers, we service what we sell. Call 499-1975. That's 499-1975.
Wow, this is amazing. I'm feeling great. Supercharged.
Do you feel better outside your home or business than in? Indoor air quality is important. Mildew, mold, smoke, water, and rodent damage are prime causes of poor indoor air quality. Ducts, Indoor Air Professionals, better known as Duct Busters, cleans HVAC systems using 127 definable Duct Busters steps. Let Mark Thompson address the indoor air quality at your business to help reduce employee illnesses. Prevent fires by cleaning your dryer vents. Mark and his parents, Dick and Joan Thompson, have been building our local economy and helping local people with HVAC systems 16 years. Ducts, Indoor Air Professionals. Call 876-9907. 876-9907. Ducks. Call now.
We've got a table here at Delia's in Saudi Daisy, ready to delight in a plate of authentic Mexican food. Delia's spreads a rich selection, loaded nachos, crazy chicken, homemade tamales, maybe the enchiladas with beef, chicken, pork, quesadillas. Every dish beautifully pictured on the menu to help us decide. Join us for lunch or dinner. We're at Delia's in Saudi Daisy on Dayton Pike near the Thrasher Light. Here's dinner. Delia's uses the freshest ingredients, cooked to perfection. Nachos, homemade. Delia's open every day except the Lord's Day. For lunch and dinner, treat yourself to Delia's genuine Mexican food. In Saudi, call 521-7145. That's 521-7145.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
You love your hometown. Are you interested in free markets, in local economy? Do you hope that Chattanooga can survive the next meltdown, the next chain of disasters in the national economy? What's the best way to live out the ideals of self-government and self-determination? Join me, David Toulis, weekdays 1 to 3.
News Talk.
Fox News Radio, I'm Pat O'Neill. A busy day at the Supreme Court. The justices ruling 5-4 against EPA rules limiting certain pollutants at coal and oil-fired energy plants.
The court ruling the agency must consider cost of compliance before deciding whether regulation is appropriate and necessary.
Fox Radio's Jared Halpern. The justices also upholding Arizona congressional districts drawn up by an independent panel rejecting a challenge from GOP lawmakers. And the court said states using a drug linked to botched executions does not constitute cruel and unusual punishment. Light rain providing some relief for crews fighting a wildfire in central Washington state.
When you look up there, a lot of this is open land, but there are homes. Many of the people and families evacuated. Firefighters want them to get out of the path of this fire.
Adam Hertz with Fox affiliate KCPQ. Some 1,800 acres of land scorched, a dozen structures destroyed. Fox News, we report, you decide.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
If the South would have won, we'd have had it made. I'd probably run for president of the southern states. The day Elvis passed away would be our national holiday. If the South would have won, we'd have had it made.
NASCAR, Laura Ingram, Dennis Miller, David Toulis, Coast to Coast AM, and CBS Radio News. Chattanooga's news, talk, and sports leader.
News Talk 1240.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Fox News Talk 1240.
There are two things I like. It's gambling and Bitcoin. So when you put the two things together, I'm in heaven. So no, I'm joking, of course. I I don't gamble, but I do like Bitcoin. Gambling goes against my beliefs. However, Bitcoin is one of my favorite things, actually, because it's a direct undermining of the American currency system. And anything that undermines the American currency system makes me very happy. Anything that makes the feds upset and the Fed upset makes me very happy. I derive great pleasure from the government's pain. So obviously, Bitcoin is something that makes me extremely happy. Well, a Bitcoin poker site founder is taking a plea deal in order to avoid jail time. Uh-oh. So plea deals are not something that I would go for. I'll put it that way. Plea deals are something that a lot of the time seem like they're kind of traps. You know, like, oh, you just take this plea deal, man. Hey, man, just take this plea deal, and you don't even have to do a good defense. Just take this plea deal, and you'll be okay. You know, they do that a lot, and it's something that kind of irks me when people jump for a plea deal, because it seems like such a cop out to me. But I don't know, whatever. So a man who allegedly ran a Bitcoin-based online poker site and then fled to Antigua after being raided earlier this year has now pleaded guilty to a lesser gambling violation in Nevada as a way to stay a near free man. He's not quite, but hey, whatever. I mean, who is a free man these days anyway, right? Like, what defines free? Who is a free man in this society anyway? We're all kind of slaves to the system. Do you have a driver's license? Of course you do. You're a slave. Do you use the U.S. monetary system? Do you have a debit card? Of course you do. You're a slave. I mean, it depends on what your definition of freedom is anyway. Can I freely traverse the globe? Sure. Can I walk out the door and not be persecuted for doing so? Can I practice my religion in a way that I see fit? Sure. As long as it doesn't involve doing drugs or killing people, then yeah. So, yeah, we're free. Okay. So, according to the Las Vegas Review-Journal, Brian Micon accepted probation on Thursday and will also pay a $25,000 fine, which is more than a lot of people make in a year, by the way. Surrendered the computers and 3.0996 Bitcoins, aka $750, and the $900 that were seized from him during the raid. Once that's complete, his charge will be reduced to a gross misdemeanor of operating an unlicensed interactive gaming system, which again shouldn't even be a crime anyway. An unlicensed interactive gaming system shouldn't really be illegal. I mean, what is an interactive gaming system anyway? I mean, the 3DO was marketed as an interactive gaming system, wasn't it? The PlayStation 2 is technically an interactive gaming system. Any game system is an interactive gaming system. I mean, it's interactive by its very nature. Otherwise, it would be a movie, right? It'd be a cinematic. But no, I know what they mean. They mean gambling, gaming, but still, they should update the definition of gaming, since it's not the same thing. I mean, playing Magic the Gathering counts as gaming. You play Dungeons and Dragons, you play Call of Cthulhu, that's gaming, isn't it? So really, they probably ought to update their definitions, or at least change the wording, but that would cause a lot of problems legally anyway. So I understand why they do it. It just seems kind of funny to me. The backers of the new swcpoker.eu, which was largely created from sealswithclubs.eu, state that they, quote, flatly reject the idea that an online poker room should require your personal information. Stands to reason. We believe the online poker experience should be similar to a live card room, whereby players can buy chips, play, and cash out anonymously. By using Bitcoin, SWC Poker can securely, anonymously, and quickly process chip transactions without requiring any documentation. If you're willing to take the risk to go into that, then what's the problem, really? I'll tell you the problem. No taxes are being made from that. You see, no taxes are being made. So now it's a big old problem. We got a big old problem on our hands. Think about the legislation which Lindsey Graham and I believe Ted Cruz are wanting to push, which is make online gambling illegal, right? You could have a video poker machine in your hands, is their argument. You could gamble with your phone. What a danger that is to society, where you can gamble with your phone, man. You can bet money with your phone. What a terrible happenstance. That's sort of the idea that they're trying to push. It's terrible because they're not making money. They'll use the facade of some moral argument, but it's not about that. It's about making money. And of course, they want you to buy into lottery instead. Don't gamble this way. Gamble the government way. Buy some lotto tickets. Gamble the safe way. And by the way, trying to win a lot of money by buying a lottery ticket is like trying to commit suicide by flying on a commercial airline. It's not going to work. It might for 1 in 1 billion people. I'm not sure what the odds are specifically, but it's really bad. It's not in your favor. My solution is, hey, don't buy lottery tickets and instead spend that money in investing in something else that actually has a better rate of return and a better chances of return. Like, opening up a small business or trying something else, other than buying a lottery ticket. Do not buy lottery tickets is my advice to you. You buy a lottery ticket, why? Why are you buying a lottery ticket? What's your problem? I'm not against, well, I am sort of against gambling, but you can make that decision for yourself. I'm not saying you should never go out and gamble because, I'm morally against gambling myself, but you can do what you want to, is my point. I'm rather anarchist in that regard. You can do what you want to do. You want to gamble? Hey, cool. That's not my, it's not my duty to push my ideals on you. If you want to gamble, you can go and do that. And the state should have no say in that. Why should the state have anything at all to say about gambling? Especially, we have this modern era where there's such a huge capitalistic opportunity to make so much money off of online gambling, but for some reason it's illegal because the government's not making any cash off of it. That's what it's all about. Or not even cash. They don't care about cash. They want numbers and bank accounts. In recent years, Antigua and Barbuda has become a known location for offshore gambling. In 2007, the nation won a landmark online gambling ruling against the United States at the World Trade Organization. I know, that one freaks me out too. Whenever you say World Trade in the United States these days, your thoughts immediately become very negative, but no, it's the World Trade Organization, completely different. The US has taken a hard line against online poker in recent years, and major poker sites will no longer do business with U.S. residents for fear of running afoul of federal law. So we have a situation now where people in the U.S. like to talk about how cool and capitalist we are, right? Like we're the ultimate capitalist society in the United States, but that couldn't possibly be true if there's regulation on business such as this one. How could that possibly be true if there's a regulation on this business? Like we say, we are the height of capitalism in this country, but you can't fly a drone for commercial purposes. We have the height, the very pinnacle of a capitalistic society, but we're going to put an embargo on Japanese cars, right? It's one or the other, man. You're either a capitalist society or you're a controlled capitalist society or you're a complete socialist society. And really, controlled capitalism and socialism is a very vague line anyway. So it's one or the other, man. Are you going to have total free markets with cars? Or are you going to have total free markets with gambling, everything? Or are you going to regulate everything? It's one or the other. As soon as you start regulating one thing, it's just going to trickle into more and more. You might call it a trickle-down economics. You might call it that and be kind of correct. So it's a very, very obnoxious situation that we're now stuck in. Well, for some reason, the folks in the government think that they are the pinnacle of moral authority in telling people that they can, or rather they cannot gamble online because they're not making any tax money over it. I mean, that's what it's all about. There's no question that it's not about taxes, right? Like it has to be about taxes. There's no other way. It's so obnoxious when you see all these senators and congressmen and even private individuals who are arguing for a control on these sorts of things. And really, it's all about making tax money. That's what it has to be about. There's no other way. And it's very, very annoying. Well, things that are not annoying, changing the subject to something that does not annoy me, music. I am a very big lover of music. I like listening to music. I like telling people about music. I like talking about music. Music is something that I'm very much into. So you might be wondering, what's going to be the first available album digitally for Apple Music, right? Like what's going to be available on Apple Music when it debuts? Well, Dr. Dre's The Chronic is going to be available digitally for the first time on Apple Music. It's not the first album to come out on Apple Music by any means, but it is going to be one of the earlier releases. Apple Music is still a new-ish thing, and Dr. Dre's The Chronic is going to be one of the albums that's going to be available digitally on Apple Music, or is now available digitally on Apple Music. Taylor Swift's 1989, however, will not be, because Taylor Swift is not really in favor with Apple. We'll put it that way. Although it is now finally making its place on Apple Music, despite a long conflict between Taylor Swift and Apple Computer Company. Now Taylor Swift's 1989 will finally be on digital release on Apple Music. So if you want a way to listen to a 1989 album by Taylor Swift, you can now do it on Apple Music. Dr. Dre's game-changing 1992 LP, The Chronic, will also be there. I actually own The Chronic on vinyl, by the way. Apple Music's launch tomorrow will also mark The Chronic's streaming debut. Rolling Stone reports Also saying, now this seems like it should be wrong. Sure, maybe Dre didn't want his classic Missive on Spotify or iTunes, but the album wasn't even available on the rapper's own Beats Music when it launched in 2014. So this is actually the first legal way you can get the Chronic streaming, unless possibly you buy it on Amazon Music. So the most logical explanation for the exclusion would be that Dr. Dre doesn't have the rights to the Chronic. But that's not true. In 2011, Dr. Dre won a lawsuit against his former label, Death Row Records, that actually gave him the digital rights to the album and entitled him to 100% of its online sales, according to Billboard. Dr. Dre also attempted to recoup his unpaid royalties and profits from unauthorized digital sales by Death Row, but lost that $3 million claim back in 2014. Of course, Dr. Dre is entitled to do whatever he wants with the Chronic because now he owns 100% of the rights to it. And it makes sense that it would be on Apple Music, given that Dr. Dre has a huge amount of stake in the Apple Computer Company. 2 down and a few more aging rockers to go. Maybe next week we can expect, according to The Verge, an AC/DC announcement. Well, that wouldn't surprise me at all, and I'm not a huge fan of AC/DC, so I can take it or leave it. But still, Dr. Dre's The Chronic in breaking music news is now available for streaming on Apple Music. You got to do something to break up the heavy hitting news, right? I'm actually, I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of a fan of Dre, sort of a passive fan of the Dre and the Snoop Dogg as well, the Snoop Dogg. Speaking of which, I was listening to a very popular, put it that way, radio show host who made an argument that if the Confederate flag is going to be banned, then why isn't rap music being banned? Which is possibly one of the worst arguments I've ever heard. It was really funny to hear, but yeah, he says if the Confederate flag is going to be banned, then why isn't rap music, where they use such profane terms such as the N word and the F word, and I don't know what the H word is, but he used that one too, and all these different things. It's like, well, they're both expressions of free thought, right? Like, you can buy rap albums just as you can buy a Confederate flag still online, right? It's just that certain retailers have a right to not sell these items. If Walmart, for some reason, decided that it would be the politically correct thing to do, perhaps to not sell Dr. Dre's The Chronic, guess what? Walmart can do that. But Walmart has made a decision to not sell Confederate flags. Guess what? Walmart can do that. That's just how it is. eBay made a business decision. Again, that's just how it is. People getting upset at businesses making businesses decisions possibly don't understand a free market system where businesses can make such decisions, right? Walmart could just as easily decide not to sell American flags. Walmart could just as easily not decide to not sell, dish rags or anything else. That's a decision for the company to make. And if we're upset about it, sure, we can petition the company to start selling it again. But again, it's a business decision. It's either you support a free market or you don't. Businesses can make these decisions. As much as it annoys us, businesses can do that. And that's a free market. That's just how it is. So getting upset about that is really not worth our time. Getting upset about it is sort of a waste of intellectual resources, because there's a lot more important things that we could put our thought to, such as our privacy, such as exerting our rights to do other things, such as, of course, bearing arms is a very important thing. There are all sorts of different things that are worthy of thought, other than getting mad at businesses for not selling things, because you can still buy them online. You can still buy them in private sales. They aren't banned. People say, oh, it should be banned, or it is banned. It's not banned. That would be a huge, huge First Amendment leap if the Confederate flag were banned from sale on a federal level. There's no way that would happen, at least in the very near future. Because again, that would be a humongous legal leap to actually have a formal federal ban. Very much doubt that would ever become a thing. And we got a caller. Hey, caller, you're on the air. What's up?
I think we have a right to be upset.
No, you have a right to be upset. I'm not saying you don't.
I will no longer shop at Walmart or Amazon.
Okay. You can do that.
They're going to be cowards and not allow the First Amendment to reign and free expression and participate in the free market by engaging in censorship, then they're not going to get my money. Second thing is, I know you didn't like flags, but don't you guys have a flag? So they go to your website, you have a flag. You have a banner and a flag. I would assume you rally around that Hot News Talk Radio flag.
Do we have? Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, it's a symbol. I'm not a huge fan of symbolisms.
Right. So why wouldn't you rally around your country flag?
I don't know.
Or what the South stood for under the Confederate battle flag?
It's old and it's outdated, for one. I mean, it's not a symbol of present day. It's a completely different movement than what we have now. So that would be
Do you
the.
have, are you into genealogy? Do you track your the history of your family?
Yeah, but that directly relates to me, so it's a completely different argument.
Do you have a family flag?
No.
Well, most people have a genealogy do. They have arms. They have an arms flag. Do you not have that?
Oh yeah, there's a coat of arms, but I don't identify with it because again, that goes way far back. It's not anything that
So symbols are important.
I don't see them as important because again, I don't identify with it.
They represent a thought. They represent an idea. They represent a principle. You've heard the saying that picture's worth 1,000 words.
Sure.
So symbolism is important to a certain extent, and that Confederate flag represents Southern independence and the right to be independent from federal tyranny. Under Article 1, Section 10, any state can choose to rule itself free of federal tyranny and federal intervention. And that's what that battle flag represented. You lose that, you lose an argument, you lose a battle. You lose, in some sense, the ability to discuss the issue that is history.
I would contend with that. And again, you have the right to display it. I mean, that's just how it is. And a business can decide not to sell that item if it so chooses.
For now, but what happens when the homeowners association says you don't?
Well, if you sign that agreement, you sign that agreement. I mean, again, if you sign that agreement, that's just how it is. But anyway, we have other things to get to. Thank you for the call. So it's such a, I don't know, it's such a non-issue to me anyway. It's just like, oh boy, let's get mad about one thing. It's such a distraction, right? Like there's so many other things going on. There's a Trans-Pacific Partnership or a Trans-Pacific Agreement. There's all sorts of different things going on. There was the terrorist attack in Tunisia that just recently happened. There was another terrorist attack just recently happened in France, you know, that nobody's talking about because we're all hung up on these really just petty issues a lot of the time. It's an issue of symbolism. It's an issue of let's all get mad about flags when there are far more important things going on. I mean, the market is doing terribly in China right now. There's almost a market collapse in China. Greece is doing awfully or doing, very poorly in the Eurozone right now. And we don't really want to talk about that. So instead, let's talk about flags. It seems like a very, very much a waste of time and certainly not something that's really worthy of any amount of thought beyond just a simple conversation. I'm not really interested in talking about that because it's not something that I identify with strongly, and I'm not very interested in it at all. Symbolism is kind of a waste of time to me, at least historic symbolism applying to the present day, because I mean, if you look at history, they didn't go back and use old symbols to represent a new movement. So it seems kind of foolish to use old symbols to represent a new movement because you can use new symbols to represent your new movement. So it seems, again, kind of a waste of time. We're so hung up on the past that we can't move forward. But anyway, Samsung is now promising to stop disabling Windows Update. Finally, Samsung has now promised to stop disabling Windows Update on hardware using its software update software. Software update software. That seems a little bit redundant. The behavior came to light earlier this week after debugger and reverse engineer Patrick Barker began investigating why Windows Update kept getting disabled on Samsung laptops. Well, Barker then discovered that Samsung's SW Update was downloading a program, no joke, called disable_WindowsUpdate.exe. So it actually is just called disable_WindowsUpdate.exe. Not very difficult to find, which, true to its name, you'll never guess what it did, disabled Windows Update. Wow. Samsung's statement today says that the company will soon stop doing it, and the company said that Samsung has a commitment to security, yada, yada. The reason that Samsung software was doing this in the first place was never actually entirely clear, although some contended that perhaps it was because Samsung had drivers that would be made a little bit buggy due to Windows Update. But if you have a Samsung laptop or Samsung computer of any sort, never fear, Windows Update is here, and you can now use Windows Update in a responsible manner just as you previously could. But just to be safe, go to Windows, Microsoft Anyway website and download a Windows Update if you have a Samsung computer, just to make sure you're up to date, because you don't want to be behind, especially when we're talking about computer updates. It's extremely important. I can't stress how important it is to stay updated with computer updates, because we're talking about security, we're talking about bug fixes, all sorts of things. You really need to stay updated. Well, if you've been keeping up on Uber at all, you may have heard about this boat in Istanbul, formerly known as Constantinople. Uber will now help you hail a boat in Istanbul. Uber's now launched a intercontinental service this week, but it's not what you would expect. If you happen to be in Istanbul, if you are, thank you for listening, you can now hail an Uber boat to take you across the Bosphorus, the strait that divides the European and Asian halves of the city. According to a blog post, the company says that you'll see Uber boat service offered whenever you're near the waterside. The speedboats, which hold 6 to 8 passengers each, which is more than a conventional cab, is worth pointing out, are owned and operated by a Turkish company, Nevet. Depending on the destination, riders could cost anywhere from roughly $20 to $150. Of course, Uber does face some competition for transportation across the Bosphorus. In addition to the public ferry, which costs about 81 cents, according to Bloomberg Business Week. I wish Bloomberg would change his name, by the way. Bloomberg is such a hard name to say. I wish he would change his name to like Bloomy or something, because at least I could say that. Gosh, I hate hard to pronounce names. There's an underground metro and 2 highway bridges that shuttle millions across the strait daily. Uber entered Istanbul last year with its traditional car hire service. It's kind of ironic that I talk about names that are hard to pronounce when my name is Russell Stroud. You have no idea how many people have problems pronouncing that. So maybe I'm being a little bit hypocritical when I say people who have hard to pronounce names are annoying, because I have a name that has many S's in it. So go figure. This isn't the first time Uber has introduced an on-demand boat service, but does appear to be the first permanent offering. Last summer, Uber offered ferry services across Boston or around Boston in partnership with Boston Harbor Cruises, but the temporary service ended once the seasons changed. So if you happen to be in Istanbul, you can now get a ferry service. No, it's not going to take your teeth away, not that kind of ferry service. It's a ferry service that'll shuttle you from one place to another. How cool would that be, though, to have a ferry service like that here in the Chattanooga area, right? Like, what if Uber decided, hey, here at Uber, we can offer a ferry service to take you from point A to point B via water, like a waterway. Here in Chattanooga, of course, we have the Tennessee River that divides the city in half. It's been cloven in two by the Tennessee River. How cool would it be if there was an Uber service that would take you from the south side to north side, or south side to north shore, or north shore to south side? How cool would that be, right? And not even Uber, a private business person could launch such a thing, right? Assuming regulation doesn't get in your way. That's the problem. When we're talking about starting up a new interesting idea, there's a lot of legal hurdles that have to be taken into consideration. That's the major problem with business in America today, is there's a lot of legal hurdles that get in the way. You have legal hurdles, you have regulatory problems, and all sorts of different things get in the way. And business in America is hard. That's the thing. Business in the United States is not easy these days. There's so much regulation getting in the way that it actually makes it very hard to start up a small business. Now, it's still great here. Don't get me wrong. I don't think I'd want to live anywhere else, but it's difficult. Government gets in the way of starting up a small business. Insurance companies get in the way of starting up a small business. There's all sorts of factors at play that weren't there 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 50 years ago. There's all sorts of different factors at play that make it very difficult to launch a business. And it's really a very obnoxious thing. Fortunately, we are finding loopholes and we are finding ways around that. And it really doesn't stop us from being a player in the local economy. Somebody who knows much more about local economy, is much more economically minded than I am, is David Toulis. And his show is Nuganomics.com right here on Hot News Talk Radio from 1 to 3, coming up in just a few minutes right here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, AM 1190, and AM 910. And you can also go to hotnewstalkradio.com and you can listen to us on the website right there and on the TuneIn app as well, hotnewstalkradio.com.
This is a mob mode. This is the mob mode.